So there is, yes, there is nothing else to do, of course. It's not a big problem.
Yeah.
Not a big problem. Not at all. I'm still not seeing Esin Bölükbaş'tayı. I'm seeing a rather Japanese name, but I'm not sure if this is Kosuke Sakura.
Yes, this is Kosuke Sakura, actually.
Good. Welcome, Kosuke Sakura.
You're welcome.
Good morning, welcome.
Good morning. So you will be presenting with Adrian Torres Astaburuaga, if I'm not mistaken.
Hello, good morning. Just for you to know, we're live streaming and I'm going to start recording in 2 minutes. We're on air.
Okay, good to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alessandro.
Before starting our session, would you like to start screen sharing? Try if it works or not. Anybody wants to do that?
Can I try?
Sure, of course.
Okay, I try.
And next, I want to try.
Sure. First, Kosuke Matsubara,
Yes.
then Kosuke Sakura.
Yeah.
Yes.
There are two Kosuke.
Kosuke.
Yeah.
On Monday, we were 3 Zeynep, so we are very used to plenty of same names. It's working perfectly, Kosuke Matsubara.
Okay, no problem.
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sharing.
Okay. It's your turn, Kosuke Sakura.
Okay.
And it works.
Yes. Can you also try making it full screen?
Sakura-san, full screen できる? Can you do it full screen?
I can try, but I don't know why. It's difficult.
Well, it's already good that way, but it would be, a little bit better.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
Okay. But it's working anyhow, what you share. Thank you.
Okay,
Esin Bölükbaş is with us also.
Great.
Good morning.
So,
Do you hear me? Do you hear me well, Adrian Torres?
yes, Ariane Torres.
Okay.
I
Welcome.
try share screening. As a
Sure,
speaker.
sure.
Günaydın Esin Hocam.
Günaydın, good morning, everybody.
I think you can see my screen, right?
Yes,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
full screen. Perfect. Thank you very much. Yes,
So we are all set.
yes. In a minute, we're going to start recording and we're going to start our session.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going with the recording. You are already on air, so it is time to begin.
Okay, thank you very much. Zeynep Hoca, if you could share the screen.
Yes.
Good morning, dear colleagues. This is the last day of AACCP conference. I would like to welcome you all to the session on sustainability of cities and rural territories in the Eastern Mediterranean. My name is Şebnem Hoşkara. I'm a professor of architecture and urbanism from Eastern Mediterranean University. I will be sharing this session together with Zeynep Ceylanlı, who is actually the co-chair of the overall conference. Zeynep Hoca, would you like to say anything?
Thank you very much. Welcome all. I'm from the Interior Architecture and Environmental Design Department of Özyeğin University, and I am very much interested in this session because I'm from Antalya, from a very nice city of Eastern Mediterranean. So I'm looking forward to hear this session. Welcome all again.
Thank you very much. And I would like to welcome you all once more. We have 5 presentations in this session. They seem to be all very interesting. So I would like to start with our first presentation. Just remember that all the presenters will have 20 minutes. And my suggestion is we complete all the presentations and get the questions and answers and discussions. We will have time for that at the end of the session. So our first presentation is on monitoring the challenges of the cultural heritage sites of Cappadocia, an overview through Göreme and Ortahisar, which is going to be presented by Funda Solmaz Şakar. Funda Solmaz Şakar is an architect specialized in restoration. She completed her master at Middle East Technical University, graduate program of conservation and cultural heritage. She holds a PhD degree from restoration program of Istanbul Technical University. Her PhD research was mainly focusing on examination and interpretation of changes in Cappadocia cultural heritage sites. Her research areas are conservation of cultural heritage, historic landscapes, and traditional building techniques. And she is currently working as a research assistant at Gebze Technical University Faculty of Architecture. So please, Funda Solmaz, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen first. Hello again. Good morning. Today I'm going to present change process and monitoring about the settlements of Göreme and Ortahisar, which were located in Cappadocia. And I want to start with the location of the region. You can see the definition of the site from the archaic period to the today, and we can say Strabon defined Cappadocia in a larger and extensive area in central Anatolia, but today the land is limited and defined very limited region in the center of Anatolia again. You can see the latest region definition with the law of Cappadocia, which was enacted in 2019. Cappadocia is a very famous place. It's very famous with its geological formations and traditional settlements, which are generated by carving tuff layer. Traditional construction technique is very unique to this site and consists of rock carved systems and stone masonry buildings. So this interlinked relation between natural and cultural assets is most valuable and significant feature of the land today. I want to define the region a little bit detailed. Here you can see the conservation areas and the boundaries of the region. The land has been preserved with different type of conservation status and designations, and most of them are overlapping each other and generating the main conservation issues about the region for a long time. Here you can see urban conservation areas, first and second degree archaeological conservation sites, first, second, and third degree natural areas. Beside them, you can see the boundary of World Heritage Sites and boundary of Cappadocia border, which is defined by the law specific to site. So I want to make a brief conservation history and the journey of the conservation in the site, because in order to explain it more deeply, you can see the details here, but I will mention some of the basic designations. The conservation activities were started in the 60s in the region. And the first determination of conservation areas was defined in the 1976. After then, we can see the designation of World Heritage Sites in 1985. The area was inscripted with the 7 part of locations. Here you can see a central area and the other 6 gradually small locations. This 7 part is designated as a World Heritage Site. So after 1 year after these designations, the central part of the region was also designated as a national park according to the Turkish laws. So when we look deeply the history of the conservation in the sites, we can see some topics are mostly discussed and they affect the conservation of the land more deeply. These are defined as disaster decisions, rock cut warehousing, planning activities, and tourism. So I want to monitor and I want to make you understand these change process in detail across 2 settlements, which are Göreme and Ortahisar. You can see the locations of the settlements, and they are both in World Heritage Sites. They have both urban conservation and natural conservation sites. Göreme has also archaeological conservation sites, and they both have traditional houses. In Ortahisar, traditional lifestyle is still going on, we can say, and Göreme is considered as a center of tourism, and Ortahisar is considered as a center of warehousing. So let's start with the disaster decisions in the region. The term disaster indicates the collapse of rock caves and rock falling in Cappadocia case. And starting from the 1950s, due to the increase in the public works and municipal services, rural settlements in Cappadocia met the waterline system. Installation of the waterline system into this kind of geological structure had some defects which were later caused the leakage into the rock formations. So this was one of the main reasons of collapsing, and the other reasons is about the rock carving workmanship regardless of thickness of the rock. And starting from the 1950s to 80s, disaster decisions was taken by the officials. With national law of disasters in late 50s, rock fallings and collapsing caves were being reported, and dwellings and other facilities were abandoned, and people were relocated according to these reports. So in 90s, when we came to 1990s, the transformations for the touristic purposes were started. And due to the building restrictions about new buildings, tourism entrepreneurs tend to use these existing building stock in rural settlements. Thus, traditional houses which were abandoned due to the disaster decisions refunction as the touristic facilities. Here you can see a detailed map of Göreme and Göreme Urban Conservation Site. Actually, we can see the geological survey reports were started in the early 60s till the late 80s. So you can see the buildings and building groups which were abandoned and then refunctioned in the settlement with different colors according to their periods here. And this is the detailed map of Ortahisar disaster area. In Ortahisar, the disaster decisions were started in 50s and they were continued to until 80s. So different from Göreme, in Ortahisar, you can see a large area in the vicinity of the citadel of Ortahisar were completely abandoned, and the area is still in this situation, like you can see on the picture on the left. Warehousing is another change factor in my study. So, except from housing needs, rock cut construction techniques is also used for agricultural needs. Due to the convenient climatic factors of the inner space of the stories, it becomes a unique feature of the region. Construction cost is approximately 1/3, and energy consumption is 1/10 of the above ground constructed stories. So it's an ecological and very authentic way of construction in Cappadocia. And rock storage sector has become one of the pioneer commercial activity apart from the tourism sector. Rock cut storage activity has started in Ortahisar in late 50s. It has contributed to development of the settlement and diversified the town's agricultural-based economy. Thereby, local population and their traditional way of life can be maintained in the can be maintained in the region. And in let me go back a little bit. Yeah, you can see the historical background of the warehousing in Ortahisar, and in the 70s, together with the conservation decisions, rock cut storage construction was prohibited in the region. So it was considered as a threat for the natural heritage site, which were disrupted for opening the storage into the geological formations. Besides, truck traffics which opened new side roads on the natural protected site for the transportation of the goods were also considered as an important threat. And in the 19th, a great number of requests are seen from the local people. So warehousing has been carried out without an upper scale development plan and its regulations for a long time. And in 2000s, the warehousing expands the other settlements in Cappadocia and becoming an important source of income. Here you can see the warehousing areas in Ortahisar. They are all underneath the residential areas of the settlement, and you can see the number of rock cut warehouses from 70s till 2019, and we can say that starting from the 70s, it has a dramatic increasing about the numbers of rock cut warehouses. So the planning activities is the other change factor. So when we start with the Göreme, Göreme was the first settlement of which conservation development plan was prepared in the early 90s. So today, some other planning activities are still going on. Ortahisar is unfortunately hasn't any conservation or development plan yet. The temporary building regulations are still in use. Tourism is one of the main factors of change in the region. The first touristic attempts was started in 50s, and the first planned tourism studies was done in 1965. So you can see the detailed circle background of tourism in the region, but we can say that the tourism designation of tourism areas is significant in terms of the development of tourism in the region and the economy, of course, in the region. So the first designation of tourism area was declared in 1989, and the second one was in 1997, and the latest one was taken in the 2005. So here you can see the boundaries of these designations, and new investments and stimulus encouragements were still going on the region. Today we can say that almost 3 million tourists visits the region, and 4 of the 10 most visited historic sites of Turkey are in Cappadocia. And you can see the numbers about the tourists in the region and the bed capacity. So the bed capacity is dramatically increased in 8 years, we can say. In plans of 1960s, Göreme was considered as a settlement which has to be preserved strictly. It was emphasized that Göreme would not be the accommodation center of the region and the focus of touristic activities. Local community and their traditional way of life should stay in the settlements according to these plans. So it was planned to exclude tourism in Göreme city center in the first plans of tourism, but here we can see that it cannot be possible, unfortunately. This is the urban conservation situation in urban conservation site in Göreme. We can see the number of hotels and number of residential buildings in the city center. So today Göreme is almost completely refunctioned as a touristic facility settlement, and you can see the number of the touristic facilities, actually the hotels in Göreme, and starting from the 90s till today, we can say that 345% was increased about the touristic facilities. You can see the tourism situation in Ortahisar. Ortahisar is still, we can see the residential buildings in the urban conservation area. The residential buildings are in majority, they are predominate the settlement, but we can say that the hotel numbers are increasing in the latest period. So when we make a brief evaluation about Göreme and Ortahisar and their changing process, in 60s Göreme became a popular tourism destination, and camping areas were established, and as I said before, the decision about keeping away the tourism in Göreme City Center was taken. So in the 80s, governmental institutes was encouraged mass tourism in this region overall, and stimulus package for tourism was provided. And in the periphery of the existing pattern, new housing zone was established, and also new buildings was established on the north of the settlement. So in 90s, mass tourism was increased. The progression to hotels from pensions and traditional houses was realized in those times, and disaster decisions started to be cancelled between 90s and 2000s. After 2000s, new buildings on the north of settlements were seen, and we can say that local community abandoned the site in those periods, and again in 2000, between 2000 and 2010, UNESCO was considered tourism as a threat in Cappadocia. So here you can see the numbers of touristic facilities between the starting from the 19th to 2020, and you can see the map of the development of the settlements. So we can see the historic center here, and we can see the other residential development areas starting from the 70s till today. When we look at the Ortahisar, it's again became a popular tourism destination in the 60s, and Ortahisar actually was planned as a center for touristic facilities.
But sorry to interrupt, Funda Solmaz. You have 2 minutes left.
Okay, warehousing as a significant source of income in those days. So in 70s, prohibition of warehousing can be seen. And so I'm going to pass it more quickly. When we came to 90s, again, mass tourism was increased, and a great number of local demands for opening new warehouses were seen in those times. So again, in those times, the increasing number of buildings in new housing areas were also seen. So you can see the dramatic rising about the warehouse numbers and touristic facilities. So we can say that in the last 10 years, the touristic facilities has been increasing quite dramatically, again in the Ortahisar. So you can see the settlement development of Ortahisar. We can see the historic city center, and then we can see the development areas due to the disaster decisions and other residential needs. And the rock cut warehouses are also can be seen also in the map of Göreme. So as a conclusion, we can say we can come some points about Göreme and Ortahisar. These are change has different scales and expansions in Göreme and Ortahisar. Change process has affected by different factors in both settlements. In the main factor for Göreme is tourism and its incomes, but the main factor for Ortahisar is warehousing and the related activities for this. Change in Cappadocia is a long-term process which were accelerated and directed to different ways. In the current state of this continuous change process, all settlements in Cappadocia would have different conservation situation and level. The factors, speeds, and results of the change are significant criteria for the sustainable conservation in Cappadocia. So that's all I can share for now. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you very much, dear Funda Solmaz. It was very interesting, and it's a very special area in Anatolia, Cappadocia region, and thank you for this extensive research. Now I would like to move to our second presentation, which is a joint work, Valley City Research on Islamic Culture Cities. As I understood, Kosuke Sakura is going to give the presentation, but it's a joint work with Ariane Torres Astabaruga and Fumiko Ikomoto, if I pronounce it right. Kosuke Sakura is an assistant professor of Faculty of Engineering in Shinshu University in Japan. He obtained PhD of Engineering from Shiba University in Japan in 2015. His specialty is urban analysis and design. He has studied about relationship between urban development and traditional canals in Valencia during his doctorate course. He is awarded the Space Design Review 2018, which is one of the biggest architectural competitions in Japan. Micro practice and macro analysis are his research styles. He has studied in Spain and France during a year, respectively, when he was a student in Shiba University in Japan. Therefore, his study fields are not only Japan, but Spain, Argentina, Morocco, etc. So I would like to give the screen to our colleague, please. You may be muted.
Dear Kosuke Sakura,
Can you look, please?
yes, we can hear you now.
We can.
Just a moment. Okay, nice to meet you.
Yes.
And good morning, everyone. I'm Kosuke Sakura. I work in Shinshu University in Japan. And Adrian?
Yes, hello. I am Adrián Torres Astaburuaga. I work in University of Lyon, France. Architect, doctor architect.
Okay, today we want to talk about the theme, Bali City Research on Islamic Culture Cities. Our research team is composed of Adrián Torres, Fumiko Ikemoto, and me. Adrián Torres and I explain today's presentation. I will kick off by talking about the purpose of this study. The purpose of this study is to clarify the relationship between the process of urban expansion, the traditional hydro system, and pre-anthropic geography in Islamic culture cities. Next, I will explain the background of this study. Can you look background page? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. When I was Dr. co-student, I had researched about their relationship in Valencia. At that time, I met Adrián Torres, who had researched very similar of mine. But Adrián had researched on center city in Valencia, and I researched on urban expanded areas. And I have joined the research team, the essence of urban civilization, in the disciplinary study of origin and transformation of ancient West Asian city since 2019. Therefore, I started to collaborate with Adrián to develop Valencia study into Islamic culture cities. And this is actual urban and farmland situation in Valencia. Please explain, Adrián.
Yes, here you have Valencia today in the 21st century, 1 million inhabitant city, today urbanized, as you can see, and a city that has had an important, even if sometimes hidden, Islamic influence from the 7th to the 13th century. Today, the fields are urbanized. The city center is placed 3 kilometers far away from the coastline, and we have a dry river that crosses from east to west the city of Valencia. There you can easily recognize the city center of Valencia that we want to a little bit give us a background. Next, Kosuke. So our two researchers, Kosuke, next image, please. Next. Kosuke?
The screen is changing actually, Adrian Torres. I wonder if you can see it or not. Yes. We already passed 4 inches.
There is a little delay, yes.
Okay.
Back.
Back.
Okay. As you see in the image, in this following image, the city center of Valencia was surrounding of lands, of agricultural lands, and that has been urbanized, especially in the late 19th centuries and beginning of the 20th centuries. That is the city center of Valencia, as you see, mineralized, a solid urban area with apparently chaotic streets and irregular traces which origin we wanted to look for. So in order to understand which are the reasons that are underneath the urban shape, we developed a methodology that we can say is a kind of urban palimpsest, next picture, where we in the beginning superimpose all historical cartographies that the city has from the 14th century until the actuality, in order to understand which is the evolution of these historical traces. With this superimposition and recomposition of the history of urban landscape that has a natural landscape or pre-anthropic geography that is in itself, we start to extract some informations related, for example, to topography, historical green spaces, topography, and hydraulic patterns that are many times underneath the urban shape. These hydraulic patterns can be, or else a first anthropic hydraulic pattern from the irrigation canals that were made during the Islamic period, or else pre-anthropic water memories of paleo canals, old rivers and meanders that were passing and in somehow influence the urban shape of the city of Valencia. This urban palimpsest is not considered as an historiographic tool in order to recover a certain story of the city, but as a tool for a future. We consider that the Valley City would mean to understand in the history of the landscape, especially in urban context, in order to really realize what landscape were there and mixture it with the contemporary situation and contemporary tools, for example, LIDAR and satellite teledetection, in order to create a line of another horizon. This is the point of view. So the next slide in red, you have urban voids. That means plots that are empty in the city. So together, the urban palimpsest with the recomposition of the voids in itself will give another plan of the situation that is the urban palimpsest that I don't know if you see, that is part of my PhD. That would mean to reconsider with the non-visible layers, the one that are obliterated, topographical, hydraulical, together with the free spaces of the city has today, understood as an opportunity. So that is my PhD. That is a center of the city. That is, we are now researching, expanding in the urban expansion area, because Kosuke and I, we have made a team, because we have partially studied different cities of Valencia, Kosuke especially the first urban expansion area. Kosuke?
Okay, so for example, this figure is my doctoral study. I studied the relationship between the process of urban expansion and irrigation canals on urban expanded area, like here. And therefore, we are trying to combine my study and Adrian's study. And this point of view is our very strong characteristics, we think. So next, I will explain the characteristics of this study. And first, Valley City research. We focus on geographical parameters and hydrographical basin, like the point of view by Patrick Guedes. Therefore, the area of our research is in each city is not only center, but also outskirts. Second, parallel case study. We try to embrace common elements and local elements of traditional hydro system still in use by comparing cities. Third, retrospective proposal. Our stance of study is not the field of history. We want to try to rethink the great traditional knowledge or reuse the amazing traditional technology on the actual urban context. Well, next, I will explain the target city in this study. Our target cities are selected by 4 conditions. First, the selected cities have highly influenced by Islamic culture. Second, the cities located in Mediterranean coast. Third, traditional hydro system is functioning or existing well in the cities. This Mediterranean map shows some hydrographical basin, like here. Fourth, the scale of the cities is medium size. In the case of large cities, expansion was an urgent problem during the modernization. On the other hand, in the case of the medium city, urban expansion may have been not so great problem than large cities. Therefore, the pace of urban expansion may have been slow, and the city may have been responded to the traditional hydro systems. May have been respected the traditional hydro systems. This is one of our important hypotheses. In this conference, we selected Valencia and Marrakesh, Morocco. Valencia is completely corresponding with the four conditions. Therefore, it can be said that Valencia would be a model city for parallel case study. On the other hand, Marrakesh doesn't locate on the Mediterranean coast. However, there are lots of past research about traditional hydro system, and there is a very important person for our study, Thierry Roof, who is the director of Water Museum in Marrakesh and worked on irrigation development in the Mediterranean country, not only Marrakesh. Therefore, we selected this city for our first research, for our first trip. Well, I'd like to start our research content and result from now on. First, about Valencia. The historical irrigation canals, it's called acequias, have supported peri-urban landscapes and the fertile, productive. Acequia de Mestalla and Acequia de Favara have influenced by urban expansion deeply because of passing near the center. Therefore, we focus on the 2 canals. Our research methodology is composed of macro perspective study and micro perspective study. In the macro perspective study, we made a multiplayer of cartographics and to show that phases of urban development in the focused period and the fall of the irrigation systems in each phase. The canals keep their shape where they work as borders to determine the different areas or the process of urban development, because in some parts the canals exist and at the edge of the areas classified by the urbanization phases. Urbanized from 1960 to 2000 is faster than others, and the rates of corresponding lines of 1960 to 2000 are lower than other periods. As I explained about target cities, I talked that in the case of medium city, the pace of urban expansion may have been slow, and the city may have been respected the traditional hydro system. We could understand that this hypothesis corresponds to the periods in the city. Next, I'll explain the micro perspective study. We carried out the field survey for clarifying the status of the canals within the urban spatial structure. This micro-analysis is essential to make up for the macro perspective study, as well as to think about how the future urban design can override them. We selected these two lines, the mainstream of Acequia de Mestalla and Acequia de Favara. In this presentation, I'll explain only Acequia de Mestalla because of the time limit and similar result. Our target line of Acequia de Mestalla is here. And we can confirm that almost of this line located in the urbanized area. These pictures are impressive ones which express the relationship between the process of urban expansion, the traditional hydro system, and pre-anthropic geography. Figure 7 shows the canal is running inside the elevated soil. Figure 8 shows the old bridge spans the canal. Figure 9 shows the area along the old city wall is wet soil because the canal ran at this area a long time ago. And figure 10 and 11, this 11 shows that there is a difference in the level where the canal is running underground. It means that the location of the canal defines the border of the site or lot in the micro perspective. Figure 12 shows the canal gives the soil wet even if it was underground. So the big trees grow along the canal in several places. This figure shows the inheritance of the irrigation canal in the phases of urbanization. We could understand that even if there is no water, the line of the canal uses moisture to form green belt in the agricultural area and some urbanized area.
Kosuke Sakura, you have less than 2 minutes left.
Wow. Okay, and we could clarify that the line of the canal, which urbanized from 19,000 to 1950, is influenced by the building blocks, and urbanized from 1960 to 2000, it influenced the urban geography, which was made by the canal in the urbanized area. And next, Marrakesh.
I explained very quick Marrakesh.
Yes,
We were 1 year and a half ago in Marrakesh. We made a study trip and we met all researchers like Thierry Rouf and Jose Torres. Marrakesh has a wet and sieve and a slope that comes from the south. You passed Kosuke, that comes from the south to the north with some wets in a torrential regime. That means that our rivers that are very torrential at some points, but are dried in the majority of time, with a very complex system of canals, irrigation canals, combined to the quetaras that are underneath systems, very interesting underneath systems that use soil, finding water from phreatic level in the mountains and bringing it to urbanity. We made that study trip in trying to understand how could we find parallel systems on together with this Valencia's plain model, finding that all these irrigation systems has a common point of view and need land, need slope, need very complete knowledge of urban topography, water underneath phreatic level water, and that all combined could be a tool in order to work towards this notion of Valley City. Valley City is a city that melts with all these biotopic, orographical, topographical, hydraulical elements that we believe city has lost in somehow and can recover. So it's by recovering all this traditional knowledge using contemporary technologies and re-understanding this history of landscape that we believe we can re-evaluate a new horizon of or else urban paradigm theory and actuations and interventions in our urban context. I think we have no time, but in any case, both cities with common past and hydraulic logic linked to urban morphogenesis that is still in use have an enormous potential for urban regeneration in coherence with the territory, if they wisely incorporate all the constituent elements of memory of water towards the city, Valley City. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Since you have no time left, maybe in the discussions you may, have time to go further on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for this interesting research presentation. And sorry for the timing. Now we are moving to our third presentation, which will be given by Esin Bölükbaşdayı on the topic of sites of modern rural life, agricultural complexes of the early republic in Antalya. Esin Bölükbaşdayı is a lecturer at Antalya Bilim University in Turkey. She is graduated from the Department of Architecture at Eskişehir Anadolu University in 2007. And she has received her master's degree from restoration program of Gazi University in 2011 and received her PhD from Middle East Technical University in Ankara in 2019. Her PhD title was The Formation of a Modern City, Antalya, 1920s and 1980s. Her research interests are history and theory of modern architecture, 20th century architecture, local modernization, spatial identities of cities, and cultural heritage conservation in rural areas. Now I would like to give the word to Esin Bölükbaşı.
Thank you very much. Now I will share my screen. I guess you can see.
Yes.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Can you make it full screen,
Full
please,
screen.
if it's possible?
Of course.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, today I will talk about agricultural complexes of the early republic in Antalya as the sites of modern rural life. After the First World War, many countries developed rural policies to include villages in the modernization process. Similarly, in the young Republican Turkey, where the largest part of the population was living in rural lands, village and rural policies were considered important to spread modern ideals. Since Turkey was a predominantly agrarian country with its large rural population and agricultural-based economy, its modernization could not be achieved without considering and integrating the rural context. As a result, rural policies gained importance in the early Republican period in Turkey. The policies were focused on educating the rural society, introducing them to modern lifestyles, and including them into the modern production phases. The village law, building model villages, and establishing village institutes around Turkey, and village education works held by people's houses were the attempts to integrate rural lands to the modernization process. Consequently, as the means to present and to strengthen the new ideology of modernization, architectural features of villages became discussion topics in the architectural milieu. The argument that aimed to keep the rural society in the villages and sought to get the urban growth under control transformed into suggestion for village development plans. While having a great role for imposing modernity to the rural lands, architecture and planning also became a converter to shift the rural identity into the local modernity. In Izmir Economic Congress, in which the economic policy of the new regime was discussed, the significance of villagers and the agricultural production in the state economy was highlighted. In his opening speech, Atatürk expressed the necessity to analyze the country as regions divided according to climatic conditions and water and soil features. In parallel to the decisions taken in the Congress, legal arrangements were planned, new policies as reduction of taxes and establishment of agricultural cooperatives was developed. At the same time, with the aim to modernize the agricultural structure of the country, mechanization in agriculture and scientific education in the field were planned. Adopting the rural agricultural identity of the country and developing it not just in economics, but also in cultural and social means as a part of the modernization project was one of the main policies of the era. In this period, village studies started to be seen as a scientific field and theoretical discussions were held alongside ongoing state practices. Village studies branches in people's houses were established, research and suggestions on villages were published via journals, and villagers were educated in scientific agricultural methods by the people's house volunteers. Another important instrument of the new regime was the village law, in which the essential requirements of villages were defined and participative construction process was recommended. Besides the sanitation measures for village houses, the law also projected the urban equipment of villages. The state regarded village square, connected roads, public meeting rooms, school and prayer rooms necessary for a village to reach to modernization goals. While creating social environments and introducing contemporary living standards, new materials and techniques were encouraged for the construction works in villages. Planning of villages also became a matter of debate among architects in the 1930s. Architectural language of the villages built by the state, the relation between local identity and contemporary materials, suggestions for village plans and housing typologies, and importance of the architects as active actors in the planning works were the subjects discussed during the period. You see some proposals suggested by the architect of the period in the screen. In the period, together with the rehabilitation of existing villages that were damaged during the war, creating modern and ideal Turkish villages was on the agenda of the country as well. The first examples had to be created for the immigrants who came to the country as a result of the population exchange agreements. The state developed two alternatives to find quick and economic solutions for their shelter problem. Initially, a typical project for economic houses was developed and applied, and 14 model villages were built in different locations of the country, including Antalya. By 1933, there were 69 model villages built by the state in different regions of Turkey. Çirkinoba model village is one of the examples in Antalya, where around 20-30 houses were already existing and had mainly been settled by Greeks before. The village plan had identical 50 houses located on the two sides of a large road, and a mosque, a school, a bazaar as a public spaces. Considering the potentials of the country and observing the scientific developments in the world, research and development on agricultural facilities was another dominant policy of the period. Farms and institutes were established as the tools of modernization within this perspective. Besides their impact on economic development, these complexes also became the center of educational and social lives. The main aims of the agricultural institutions was to determine the regional agricultural techniques, to promote the use of agricultural machines, and to educate the society in agricultural field. The management of agricultural combines and the institution of state agricultural enterprises were charged to analyze the regional differences in the country to develop agricultural development plans. By the way, agricultural schools were founded in different cities. Agricultural academy was established in Ankara. And during the 1923 to 1938 period, many seed breeding and experimental stations and farms were established around Turkey. As I try to summarize, after the proclamation of the Republic, the country underwent radical reforms in all fields. Even though the major subject of transformation was a new capital, Ankara, the influences of the reforms were felt in peripheral cities as Antalya, but in a lesser extent. The processes of modernization realized in an agricultural rural settlement resulted in the confluence of local characteristics with central decisions. Antalya is a coastal city located on the Mediterranean region of Turkey. The land border of the city is defined by mountains, Taurus Mountains, which run parallel to the coastline. The dynamic line of its coast, rivers and waterfalls that relate to the city to the sea, fertile plains between the sea and the mountains, and green areas on the mountains define the main geographical characteristics of the city. As a consequence of the Mediterranean culture, mobility has been one of the dominant concepts in the development of its regional identity. In the 20th century, following the changes in economic and political relations of the world, a settled life was adopted instead of nomadic practice, and an agricultural identity became dominant thanks to the fertile lands and climatic conditions of the region. Agricultural production and rural lifestyle were the definitive characteristics of the city at the beginning of the 20th century. Antalya kept its agricultural and rural characteristics and experienced modernization under the influence of rural policies in the first half of the 20th century. In the direction of the modernization project of newly established republic, rural areas were rehabilitated, new agricultural institutes and villages were established in the hinterland of the city, while the intervention in the city center was quite limited until the 1940s. Regarding the relation between central and local dynamics and environmental features, rural and agricultural complexes, public buildings, residential buildings, industrial complexes, and lastly, touristic facilities built during the 20th century acted important roles in the transformation of Antalya from a rare rural to an urban settlement and then a tourism center. Due to the geographical condition of Antalya, its villages have been located on both mountainous and plain lands where agricultural production has been possible. Karpat indicates that since production is much more in plain lands, agricultural economy of villages at such places, lands have been more developed. In a similar way, in the site selection of the agricultural complexes built in the Republican period, closeness to natural water sources and potential productivity of the lands were the main criteria. This approach resulted in a dispersed layout of the agricultural complexes in Antalya, as you see in the map. In parallel to the agricultural policy of Republican Turkey, the Mediterranean coast of the country was chosen as the land for citrus production due to its climatic conditions. In this way, it was aimed to reduce foreign dependency for citrus, which had increased after the First World War with the loss of citrus-rich lands as Palestine and Syria. In Antalya, where agriculture had always been an important component in the economic life, citrus was determined as the major agribusiness commodity. In 1926, as the very first attempt to develop agricultural economics, Citrus Tree Station was established on a 40-acre land, which was 3 kilometers away from the city center. The director of the station expressed that American and English colonies that had already established stations a century ago served as the model for the Citrus Tree Station in Antalya. The main aim in establishing such a station was to play an active role in agricultural production and to guide local farmers with contemporary techniques. Considering to have close relations with existing farmers and to have similar climatic conditions with theirs, the location of the station was chosen close to the existing gardens and farms. Besides citrus, various other agricultural products from wheat to banana, from rice plant to cotton were also analyzed and introduced, and the possibility to produce these items in Antalya lands was discussed during the early Republican period. Bileydi Farm and Tugayolu Farm were the first examples in which rice plant was tried, and after these two examples, the society was encouraged to produce rice plant in any available land. The first scientific experimental station was established near Aksu River with the name of Antalya Rice Plant Experimental Station. It was in 1933. In 1937, the field of station works was expanded, research on tropical and subtropical plants were started, and new products were produced. Consequently, the name of the station changed as Hot Climate Botanic Experimental Station. The name of the institution has changed in time according to the products and according to the content they produce. Tankmal from Sweden and Şevket Bey were the founders of the institution. International developments in the agricultural field were closely followed during that period, and many different products as rice, coffee, banana, cotton were tried to produce in the station. Besides the research and production facilities, the station also had the task of educating farmers. Tankmal, the specialist in climatic plants, was in contact with different countries in the subject of plant variety of the institution, and you see one of his letters about this subject. The station was designed as a complex in which housing units and social infrastructure were placed together with the production areas as factories and ateliers. In such multifunctional environments as state farms, the new life practices were experienced by the workers and their families. The layout of the complex displays the rational and functional characteristics of the modern life while sustaining the agricultural tradition of the region. Creating an interface between modernism and locality, the complex became a processor model of new life standards for Antalya. However, for the expo organization in 2016, the complex was demolished on a large scale and an expo complex was designed on the land, as you see in the earth photos. On the other side, the land of about 22,000 hectares in the northern part of the city, which belonged to the Directorate of Foundations, had been neglected for a long time before the Republican period. In 1937, this land was analyzed by the Directorate, and the characteristics of the soil was found suitable to plant various tree types. However, there was a lack of water, and then the problem was solved, and in 1965, an olive oil factory was established there. In the first 15 years of the Republic, after the analysis of Antalya lands by the Ministry of Agriculture, different products were produced and new scientific methods were tried. The attempts of the state and the efforts of the society as the response would result in a large industry after 1950s. Besides the economic supports and policies to increase agricultural productivity, modernization ideas also prescribed the cultural and social development in rural areas, and education was the main tool for that. Education progress in villages started in 1937 under the name of the Campaign of Education in Villages, and in this philosophy, teachers were missioned to apply state policies in villages with the aim to modernize them. Teachers were also responsible to spread the knowledge and implementation of scientific agricultural techniques in villages. Village institutes, as a comprehensive model, were started to be established in the villages in the 40s. In the site selection of village institutes, Regions were analyzed in terms of population, geography, and socioeconomic status. Considering a uniform distribution around the country, the sites were selected out of the cities and on uncultivated lands near villages. Therefore, recognizing local conditions and applying scientific methods in situ would be possible in an education program. For the architectural projects of the village institutes, a national competition was organized. One of the 14 village institutes established in Turkey was in Aksu, in Antalya region. The project was designed by architect Asım Mutlu. In the spatial organization of the Aksu Village Institute, a segmented layout of small-scale buildings was preferred, and each function was located in different buildings. So we can say a functionalist design idea is occurred in that project. With the aim to create a cultural zone for the Antalya region as a whole, Aksu Village Institute aimed to educate village children to be the future teachers of the country. Agricultural projects of the early Republican period had the importance of being the spaces of mass education besides their productive and economic contribution to the new regime. On the other side, in the opening speech of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey in 1937, President Atatürk announced the national economic development policy with his consideration that agricultural, trade, and industrial activities and all other public works could not be handled separately. Even though the base of the national economy was seen as agriculture, in order to create a value for products, industrialization was seen mandatory. The new capital Ankara and the regional cities that were connected became the sites of the initial and large-scale industrial activities. On the other side, many cities, such as Antalya, witnessed smaller-scale industrial formations in the early Republican period. In the formation of industrial identity of Antalya, local natural entities were definitive in terms of both the product range and also the land use decisions. The first industrial activities of Antalya had been realized in small-scale ateliers and factories located in the historical core of until the Republican period. In parallel with increasing population and urban growth, the bigger scale factories were built in the peripheral lands later. Starting with the mills and factories in the city that used the water as the main power, the industrial development of Antalya between 20s to 80s included both the agricultural-based production, such as cotton, guayul, olive oil, and also the mining products like chrome and ferrochrome. In the 30 and 40 period, 1930 and 1940 period, following the circumstances in the construction field, factories that produced building materials were established in various cities in Turkey. But Antalya differs from other cities in this respect. While the construction industry developed in other cities, industrial facilities in Antalya were mainly based on agriculture. The industrial development of the city thus followed its productive historical background, and the main field of factories was also agricultural production until the 40s. In 1928, Sericultural School and Station was established to revive sericulture, which had been one of the developed facilities in Antalya in the 19th century too. Sericulture, which had been abandoned due to the war conditions in the beginning of the era, tried to be revived after the proclamation of the Republic. A station and school was established to redevelop this local production and to increase the economic income of the city. However, they couldn't manage the expected level, and it was closed down later. Besides its modernist philosophy that combined local culture of production and institutionalization of the new regime, Sericultural School carried the features of modernism in terms of its architectural style. Located in an urban configuration of the Republican period, Karayolu Park, the building has a modern language with the composition of vertical and horizontal elements, flat roof, and modest facade organization. And after the 50s, the changes in the economic policies of the country and the developments in the communication field led to complex industrial organizations in the city.
I'm interrupting, but you have less than a minute left.
Okay, now I am going to faster. Cotton weaving factory was established in the peripheral lands of the city with its social and cultural activities included, and the industrial enterprise, which focuses on agricultural production, which is cotton, was also important industrial activity for the city in the 50s. Olive oil factory was established in the Vakıf farm, which I was mentioning before, and this olive oil factory also located in a bigger land in the city, and which is a dominant green land for the city, is an important example for industrialization of agricultural activities. And all that activities indeed managed by different actors, which are both central actors and also local actors, because we can say that without adaptation of local actors in that sense, central decisions cannot work in that kind of modernization process. So there was a collaboration of central and local actors in that development, which is based on rural and agricultural identity of the city. And as a conclusion, as seen in the case of Antalya, the reformist perspective of the modernization project that started to transform the urban characteristics of the cities considered the natural environment as the source for its aims, accepting the local identity as the guide to be developed. In writing local architectural histories, the determination of the effective actors and also vernacular habits and local traditions are important to talk about a local architectural history. They had both important roles in local processes of modernization, as seen in the transformation of Antalya from a rural to urban settlement during the 20th century. For instance, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, an interesting presentation. We are now traveling around the world somehow, two places in Turkey. Now we are moving to another location for our fourth presenter. Mr. Kasuke Matsubara will be talking about concepts and details of evolutionary planning theory as seen in the Damascus 1968 master plan. Mr. Kasuke Matsubara is born in 1973 in Kanagawa. He is an associate professor of the University of Tsukuba in Japan. He received his PhD from the University of Keio in 2005, having been working for urban planning history in the Middle East and North Africa. He received the East Asia Planning History Prize of the International Planning History Society in 2016 for his article, Yoji Banoshoya, I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Yes, it's nice. It's okay.
A Japanese planner devoted to historic cities in the Middle East and North Africa, which was published in Planning Perspective in 2016. And now we would like to give the platform, the screen to Mr. Kasuga. Yes.
Yes. Can you see? Thank you, Chairman. My name is Kosuke Matsubara from the University of Tsukuba, Japan. I'm really happy to be here. My presentation is titled Concepts and Details of Evolutionary Planning Theory as seen in the Damascus 1968 Master Plan. Damascus can be a subject of not only architectural history, but also archaeology, anthropology, and modern urban planning. One of the important issues around this city is how to make balance between conservation and modernization. The purpose of my research is to examine the evolutionary planning theory proposed by Ban Shoya in Damascus 1968 Master Plan. Firstly, I'd like to introduce this Japanese urban planner, Yoji Ban Shoya. He elaborated the master plans of Beirut, Damascus, and Aleppo as a specialist of UNDP in 1960s and 70s. His work is important in the context of international cooperation, but little is known about him. just see, please see. This is a master plan of Damascus in 1968. Here is his name. He elaborated this master plan with Michel Ecochard, French planner. This plan is a little bit old, but still an active legal plan. This is a master plan of Aleppo in 1973. Here is a credit of Banshoya in Arabic, you see. So now I'd like to confirm the history of Damascus. I know most of you know very well about the history of Damascus, so I just do it very briefly. This picture shows the Roman grid street pattern in the age of ancient. You can see the Temple of Jupiter here, theaters, and Odeon here. It is also said that Agora was around here. In order to imagine the urban landscape in the Roman age, maybe Palmyra is a good example. Sorry, you know very well. Now we skip to the age of the Arab dynasties or the age of Islam. Here, let me say some basic things that all of you know very well again. This is a very famous figure about Damascus showing Roman grid in red lines, and green lines shows the Islamic narrow streets. Is it okay? About an hypothesis about the process of dividing and reorganization of the Roman street into souk. It was suggested by French archaeologist Jean Sauvager. You see, from left side, this shows Roman age structure. And as times go by, the spaces are reorganized and divided into small souks. This is just a hypothesis by Jean Sauvager. So as a result, the city was overcrowded by dividing spaces, as the picture today shows. What's important is that some of Roman heritage were buried during this process of overcrowding. For example, this picture shows the situation of the famous gate of Roman temple in early 20th century. You see, this is pediment, and these are Cornish-style columns, but they are buried. You see, there is a man here. That means there is a land is coming this level. Okay. Then now I'd like to talk about the master plan of 1968. This plan was once criticized very strongly, actually. For example, this is the document by UNESCO in 1988. This is one example. Let's see a little bit. They say, for example, all in all, it can be said that this master plan, if fully executed, would probably have destroyed the character and the unity of the world city. So it's a very strong criticism. Later, I will come back to this criticism. Now let's examine this master plan itself. This is a figure appeared in the master plan to explain their concept of Banshoya and Ecochard. It is entitled Reconstitution of the Antique City. That means a revival of the Roman grid. This is figure 46, actually, numbered. And this is figure 47 of master plan, entitled The Spatial Management of the Old City, Aménagement de la Ville Ancienne, proposing new roads inside the city. That is, they are based on the idea of the revival of Roman grid in order to explain the necessity of the modern road. So now we go back to the UNESCO's viewpoint. The important is here. The somewhat romantic attitude toward the archaeological vestige of the Roman street network, combined with the idea of making it a tool for the introduction of the modern vehicular traffic, led the planners to disregard the essential values of the living historic city. This is the master plan had romantic attitude, which is a simple tool, they say. My question here is it a simple attitude or a simple tool? This is the original of the master plan. I took photocopies of it in IFPO of Damascus before the civil war. Here is a quotation of the original text of the master plan in French. En considérant les fondations du palais Azem, blah, blah, blah. I think I summarize in English. I discovered the 14th century Mamluk era Tenghis Palace under the 18th century built Azem Palace. So I think it is expressing a strong motivation of Ecoshar himself because it uses the first person, J. Découverte. Is it simple attitude or tool? Let's continue a little bit. In French, si j'avais continué les fouilles, je savais par le texte que, blah, blah, blah. In English, if I had continued my excavations, I would have found Muawiyah's palace, the walls of the temple, and even the buildings of the kings of biblical times. So Ecoshar also uses first person here. So how do you think about it? I think Ecoshar was just serious for Roman or Hellenistic remains, isn't it? And as far as I examined, UNESCO report does not deal with this idea seriously. This is an important point. So actually, I'm favorable for the UNESCO's viewpoint. I agree with their criticism. But at least I want to say, this story may lead us to a question, what is conservation? Is a revival antique city or ultimate conservation? Obviously, no. The whole city should be conserved as it is. However, our question remains, what is conservation? What exactly we are conserving now? Now we go back to the origin of Banshoya's evolutionary theory in 1950s. It was Banshoya's first masterpiece realized in Tokyo and published in a famous magazine, Shinkenchiku. Please see that there are two plans called surface plan and completed plan. His idea was a kind of partition-free plan. As a family grows, you can put more partitions and divide the room. This is a concept of evolution effected by his master, the famous architect Kiyoshi Seike. After that, Banshoya went to Paris to participate at Art, headed by George Candice. Candice is a disciple of Le Corbusier. Candice really loved this masterpiece of Banshoya and made design of it by himself. It is appeared in the L'Architecture d'aujourd'hui, an architectural magazine, in 1953. Candice said, the functions of gathering and sleeping can be determined by a simple partition. The architect builds only the outer shell. The rest is for the inhabitants themselves to decide according to their needs and customs. So it's the inhabitants themselves to complete the houses. This is the idea of evolution. So this picture shows Banshoya and Candice. They also published an article. You see here, this is an George Candice and Banshoya is here. As far as I know, Candice took evolutionary theory by himself. This picture shows the concept of his plan entitled Evolutionary Housing. It's only by Candice. It's almost the same idea with Banshoya's. Firstly, the couple is living, only couple. And they have a child in the next step. And the third step, the children are growing and becoming independent. And finally, in the fourth stage, the children left and the couple remaining only. Now the furniture is reducted. That means this evolution process is reversible in the idea. So I have a small hypothesis here. I just want to show a little bit. I think this kind of evolution theory was applied in Damascus. That means this is the upper picture shows the evolutionary theory of Ban Shoya himself, and the second picture shows the Jean Sauvage's hypothesis. That means that in the Roman age, they have a huge, very grid type street pattern and becoming tuk-tuk as times go by. This is also recognized, can be recognized as an evolutionary theory, a kind of evolutionary, isn't it? So, sorry. What important is by doing so, we can reconsider the urban planning history of Damascus and can well explain the situation today. I will show some examples which can be recognized as a result of the master plan 1968. Firstly, the gate of Jupiter is here. In 1971, there are small shops alongside of the gates. But in 2018, the shops were removed, and you can see clearly the structure of the Jupiter gate. It's a kind of excavation or a result of degagement of the idea. As well, this is Sukmido Pasha, and it was renovated by a MAM project. And they put Roman column on the street, on the road, and it looks like a little bit Roman street. I can explain with this plans. This is a plan in 1934, and you see there are some buildings here and small shops here. However, this is actually today's area photo by Google. You see there is a huge place here. It was made by, according to the master plan of 1968. And here is the Jupiter gate. You can see it clearly now. There are also another examples. This is an example of street road dating back to the age of Bible. Before, there are small construction which has not historical value like this. And after they removed it, how do you think this renovation? And by the way, these houses with this kind of bay window are originally from Turkey. You see, I took some photos in Ankara in order to examine the origin of these houses. Even they made a touristic route in 2010. This map is entitled Classical Route. You can enjoy all the classical heritage remaining in the old Damascus. There's a temple of Jupiter here, and agora is here, and theater, street road like this. And this is the example of Shrine of Saladin. It was also buried. So the master plan proposed the degagement here, making it a kind of archaeological park. You see, there is some Roman columns and shrine of Saladin here. Let's see photos. Yes, this is the shrine of Saladin. It's very famous, and there is an arch, Roman arch here. And this one, it's also shrine of Saladin, and there are ancient columns. In my opinion, I'd like to evaluate this landscape as a coexisting of culture. So this is my conclusion. firstly, the master plan of 1968 had a clear intention to partially reconstitute of ancient Damascus. It is not just a simple attitude or tool. It was an object. On the other hand, it is confirmed that some new modern road affects the old urban fabric in the age of Arab dynasties. UNESCO's criticism is still important. The point about Ecoshar and Banshoya's evolutionary theory was to control the overcrowding by reduction of small constructions which are not valuable. Based on these findings, I propose a reconsideration of urban planning history of Damascus in order to explain the situation today in a better way. This is a biography. And thank you very much. Sorry for my poor English.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It is very interesting. It takes us back to an old plan, but it seems that it is still valid and it is still valuable to do some discussions over it, which we will do it after our last presentation, which will be given by Donika Sanowska.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Bethesda, the social center of the town in the past and nowadays. Donika Sanowska is a PhD student in Sofia University. She's working in the field of the New Balkan history. She graduated with honors from Sofia University with a master's degree in diplomacy and intelligence on the Balkans. Donika's scientific interest is focused on the Ottoman history and in particular on the Ottoman social history and diplomacy. So I would like to leave the word to you, Donika.
Yes. I will share now the screen. I hope that you can all see the presentation. You can hear me. So the topic of my paper are the Bedestens as a social center of the town in the past and nowadays. The establishment of these buildings can be traced back to the time of the Seljuks, but the development and transformation of the Bedestens into commercial buildings with specific architecture and many important functions happened through the Ottoman Empire. Since their establishment, the buildings have been a city hub and the centerpiece for the urban population. The subject of this paper is to trace back the Bedestens of Ottoman style, which took an important place in the commercial, social, and economic life of the empire. They have managed to survive until the present days, and as two examples, I will present the Bedestens in Skopje, North Macedonia, and Yambo, Bulgaria. What are the main characteristics of the Bedestens? The origin of the word comes from the Seljuks, and it's having an Arabic and Persian roots. It comes from the words bez, which means cotton, and bezaz, called sewer. And with the Persian suffix istan, it acquired the meaning of a clothing market. The Ottomans adopted it and used it in their official documents. In the 17th century, with the development of the Ottoman language, the word transformed into the version Bedesten. Although the Seljuks constructed the prototype and the main thought of the idea of the function and the role of the buildings, the Ottomans were turning them into commercial and social center of the cities as one of the most prominent urban institutions closely linked to the foreign trade of the empire. The distribution of the Bedestens is related to the importance of the settlements in which they were located, and it showed the important geographical location of such settlements. What are the main functions of the Bedestens? They are multifunctional buildings which combine commercial, economic, and social functions. The most important one of them relates to the provision of a well-protected space for trade and banking operations. That is why the Ottomans first construct them as buildings with thick stone walls and lead domes. Another specific function was the storage of valuable, important goods and items exhibited by merchants in their shops. The building also fulfilled the important social function of storing valuable personal belongings of private individuals. In most cases, the citizen deposited money and jewelry, which they were afraid of keeping in their houses. Within the Bedestens, they fell under state protection in specially designed safes for the purpose of safekeeping of the state items. An additional social function we can add to this list was the storage of so-called items held in trust or emanet. The building is also a safe place for storing the important administrative documents related to the city. Here we can say that the registers of the town were saved in the Bedestens. But the main...
I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you moving your slides? Because we just see...
no, I'm not moving them now.
Sorry.
Yeah.
All right.
The main socio-economic function of the Bedesten was serving as the center of a government and the seat of the so-called settled representatives of the trade guilds. In addition to the functions mentioned above, and being of crucial importance for the life in the empire, the buildings served as a social center of the city. It was a gathering place where all the inhabitants of the city and the surrounding area met to trade, communicate, share news, thoughts, and ideas. On the territory of this institution, an intensive cultural exchange between people of different classes, religions, and cultures occurred. Within the Bedestens, all people were equal, as we can see on the picture here. Organization of the Bedestens. To ensure the functionality and security of merchants and their goods, on the grounds of the Bedestens, it was necessary that the central government formulated rules of conduct on site. They imposed a strict organizational structure. Its main task was to maintain the order and to monitor the correctness of merchants. Except the information that we can find in the Ottoman administration concerning this topic and all of the registers, I managed to find information in itinerary, which is called 3 Years in Constantinople, wrote by Charles White in 1844. In his book, he's showing one of the Bedestens in Istanbul, and he's writing about the organization. On top is the Sheikh or Kehaya, which is general manager of the Bedesten. He's responsible for the imperial structures, and through him, the imperial wall reached the merchants. A deputy governor called Nakib assisted him. To these important employees, we must add 6 elders. And from the middle of 14th century onwards, the position of Delao appeared. He is an intermediary and a broker. Due to the exceptional importance of the Bedesten as a commercial building and its important place to store valuables, there was a need for around-the-clock security to guard buildings. All of the above officials worked on the territory of the Bedestens are appointed and administered directly by the central government. The architecture of the Bedestens, here on the picture, you can see one Arasta Bedesten in Istanbul, an open-air spaced Bedesten. The specific architecture is a result of the development of the buildings between 15th and 17th century. They're designed as independent commercial sites connected to the central streets by large gates, usually built with thick stone walls with rectangular shape, and the main method of covering the structure is by a system of domes. They can vary from 3 to 20 number. The lighting of the pedestal is provided by small windows, which are located at the top of the walls. They also serve as ventilation. The shops on the territory of the buildings are usually located along the walls and there are small separate rooms. There are two types, covered and uncovered. The pedestals can be different types. In this paper, I will stick to the characteristics made by Professor Mustafa Jazar in his book, Typical Commercial Buildings of the Ottoman Classical Period and the Ottoman Construction System. In this book, the leading element for consideration of the pedestals is the view of them as a separate architectural site, which are not part of the big market in the town. The author divides them into 6 types. Here on this slide, I found a few types of them: pedestals with shops outside, pedestals with arasta, and arasta pedestal. There are also pedestals and plain single ones. The administration of these buildings on the territory of the Ottoman Empire were under the supervision of the imperial departments engaged in charitable activities. They were part of the so-called system of the Vakıf. Due to their great importance for commercial life and the economy of the empire, in most of the cases, they were built on the initiative of the state authorities, viziers, or governors of districts. As property of the Vakıf, the revenues and income from the activities of the pedestals usually provide funding from charitable projects or institutions. And now we will trace back the pedestals as part of the cultural heritage. They are buildings of great importance, like I was talking about them now. So after the decline of the Ottoman Empire, the buildings adapted to the 20th and 21st century. This was possible thanks to the actions taken by state and supernatural bodies to restore and renovate them. Campaigns for restoring of the pedestals are in the spirit of preserving and keeping the material cultural heritage. They're inspired by programs for the protection of architectural sites of historical significance, managed by local and international organizations. Here we need to say a word about UNESCO, which play a big role in the preservation of architectural monuments and their conservations. As 2 examples of preserved pedestals, I will show now the pedestal in Skopje, the capital of Republic of North Macedonia, and Tiambu, Bulgaria. The pedestal in Skopje, North Macedonia, was built with donations from Ishak Bey, Sanjak Bey of the Skopje region between 1415 and 1439. There is a strong evidence that the building was erected in the middle of the 15th century because it was mentioned in Ishak Bey's Vakfiye from 1444. Located within the so-called area of the Old Market of Skopje, nowadays, the pedestal has served as a city hub and a center for the city's commercial life. Its erection gave an initial impetus to the development of the commercial part of the city, and subsequently, the shopping streets were formed around it. Today, we know this area as the Old Market. The original architecture of the pedestal from 15th century was destroyed first in 1689 when a large fire broke out in the city. It was restored around 1899 by Haji Hussein, Osman Bey, and Yashar Bey, whose names are indicated in an inscription above the main entrance of the building, which you can see on the first picture. The market suffered another disaster, and in 1963, the main buildings of the market and also the pedestal were destroyed by earthquake. This necessitated its restoration between 1964 and 1965. The modern look, the pictures here on the slide are from 2018. They're from my personal archive, and they are showing the modern look and architecture of the building, which is built on the foundations of the original one. But sadly, they differ radically from its original appearance from the middle of 15th century. However, the market and the Beresten continues to perform its original functions even today, but this time as part of Skopje's cultural heritage under the protection of state authorities. In 2008, the National Assembly of the Republic of North Macedonia has adopted a law giving the Skopje Bazaar, including the Beresten, the status of a cultural heritage of special significance, subcategory of great importance. To coordinate the actions related to the protection and restoration of the bazaar, Article 10 of this law also established a national council for the restoration of the Old Skopje Bazaar at the initiative of the government. It consists of representatives of various cultural, religious, and state institutions interested in the development of the complex. The Ministry of Culture and its Department for the Protection of Cultural Heritage are overseeing the project as the supervisory institution. 2 years later, in 2010, the implementation of the program for restoration of the complex begins under the leadership of the Parliament of Republic of North Macedonia, together with other institutions, to simulate the development of trade and social activities. The result is that today, the Beresten in Skopje attracts many tourists and guests from other towns and countries with its authentic architecture and traditional style. Here in the area of the Beresten, tourists can enjoy traditional Turkish tea and coffee. The small shops that are located there are the places in which artisans and people producing their traditional things. So the Beresten is also an attractive center for tourists who love art because there are a lot of art shops. The next Beresten is one in Yambu, Bulgaria. It is the only surviving building of this type from the Ottoman period in Bulgaria due to this problem in Bulgaria after the liberation connected with destructing Ottoman architecture and buildings. The Beresten in Yambu was built in 1509 with donations from the Grand Vizier Atik Ali Pasha. The building it's in the most central place of the city, which initially made it a center of the town. As early as the 17th century, it was characterized as one of the most beautiful and lively commercial buildings in the Balkans. This is testified by the Ottoman traveler Evliya Çelebi, who was passing by Yambu in 1667. In his book, he writes, "There is no such lively and decorated Beresten in any other country. All valuable things are in it in abundance and for nothing." 2 centuries later, during the Russo-Turkish War of 1877-1878, the building was emptied and used by the Ottoman military as an arms depot. In the 1920s, the Beresten gradually began to regain its former commercial appearance and social functions. The building received more attention during the reign of the Bulgarian King Boris III, who declared it as a national antiquity. Since 1972, it has the status of cultural monument. Major renovations and restorations were carried out in 1973, as the construction and outer appearance are preserved as close as possible to the original one from the 16th century. After the renovation works, the building opens as a shopping center and functioned until 1989, when after the fall of the communist regime in Bulgaria, the building was abandoned for around 25 years. The Palestine in Yanbu was brought back to life in 2014 when the municipality of Yanbu takes measures for its restoration. For the implementation and the realization of this large-scale activity, the municipality was supported with funds from the European Union under the operational program Regional Development through the project Improvement and Promotion of Leading Tourist Attractions in Yanbu.
Donika Tsanovska, you have 2 minutes left.
Okay. The restoration process was completed 1 year later in 2015 when the site was officially opened and its activities resumed. Today, the Beresten in Yanbu is used as a cultural and information center, which offers visitors a wide variety of exhibitions related to the history, way of life, and culture of the town from antiquity to the present days. The building once again becomes the central social hub of the town of Yanbu, which attracts both locals and guests from other towns and countries who want to immerse themselves in the spirit of past eras. As we can see, the two Berestens are still working, but in two different ways. That is why I wanted to show specifically the Beresten in Skopje, which is working as a real Beresten. Its functions from 15th century onwards, and the Beresten in Yanbu as a Beresten which is working as a museum, which is something new. The conclusion is that the Berestens have existed for centuries and has always been an important part of economic and social life in the Islamic world. They have managed to survive through the centuries and face the challenges of the 21st century. Today, they continue to exist, preserving their historical and cultural value with the combination of construction of modern social functions, like the case in the Yanbu Beresten. The Berestens in Skopje and Yanbu are bright examples of buildings that have stood the test of time and managed to find their place in the new urban environment. Thank you for your attention.
Very much. Thank you. That was also an interesting presentation. Now I would like to open the platform for any questions to 5 of these interesting research presentations, any discussion points, questions, or comments. I think we have like 15 minutes or a little bit more for that.
May I start?
You may write your questions or you may just raise hand and ask. Yes, Alessa, Alessa, please.
I noted down 3 comments for 3 of the speakers. Let's go, should we go backwards or backwards? Starting from the last one, Danica Tsanovska. So a very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. We have been trying in the past 2 years at the Dynamic Research on Urban Morphology Laboratory to establish connection with academic institutions in Bulgaria for the amount of common heritage that Turkey and Bulgaria has, both in the Byzantine times, the Roman times, but also the Ottoman times. So it would be nice if we could, sort of link with your university or you within the ongoing researches on heritage in the future, such as the summer schools or the, all the things we do. So I'm very glad that you joined our symposium. Okay, that's one. Going backwards, Matsubara. It is very interesting to place in context, in time, the evolutionary theory. In the 1960s, a time where a number of people in the world were sort of putting out a different vision for the planning idea in different countries, such as Colin Rowe, or, in the Texas Rangers, or Severio Muratori, or so this evolutionary theory is indeed very interesting today, as it is giving a different vision, not the machine, but the organism, okay, the evolutionary idea. And the third comment is about Sakura. A few years ago in Valencia, we had the ISUF International Conference, and therein I presented a paper on the attractors, which does include different cases, including the waterways as attracting in their form the direction and shape of the road. So when I saw that slide, which was showing the waterways and how some roads have maintained the track of what was there before, I thought of that paper, which could be interesting for you because it gives you a diachronic method to understand how these things attract or repel each other. So I'm going to put the PDF and the citation in the chat. So, but I mean, I'm very interested in your approach because it is showing, I mean, what is underground, even though it's not archaeology, the river is a form of archaeology, if you wish. Thank you very much. That was my comment.
Thank you, Alessandro. Any other comments or questions? I would like to, while waiting for others to think further, I have a question to Funda Solmaz, if possible, the first presentation. We all know that tourism has a high impact on heritage sites. It may bring economic benefits at a high cost for the preservation of the site and the cultural assets. I would like to ask you, how efficiently is tourism impact managed in Cappadocia, either Ortahisar or Göreme? Has the management of the site implemented a strategy like sustainable tourism, ecotourism, cultural tourism to maybe to prevent the degradation of the site and the disruption of the cultural assets because of touristic exploitation? Is there a proper site management?
Thank you for your question. Unfortunately, there isn't any planned or organized decisions about tourism in the land. As you may know, that the site management system was quite new in the region, and I hope in the further years, maybe this is the first action that will be achieved in the next years, because up to today there isn't any planned or organized tourism activities, or there isn't any upper scale plan which is regulated the conditions of the tourism. So this is one of the significant and basic conservation problems in these World Heritage Sites as well. So unfortunately, right now there isn't any management system about this.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? And how is that possible? There is a question in the chat box, probably following what you have said on
about Cappadocia, are they asking? It's a very chaotic and very problematic way of conservation in Turkey, and especially in Cappadocia, it's a very there are a lot of conservation status and preservation areas about the site. So we are lucky that we have still some things that we can preserve, but unfortunately it is an unsuccessful way of conservation in Turkey.
Thank you.
Maybe Şebnem Hocam, I may ask a question to Esin Bölükbaş'tayı. Somehow maybe it can be related to this chaos or all the problems to preserve anything in Turkey. So thank you for your presentation. I was very enthusiastic when I was listening to it. And I was wondering, so apparently these rural or village modernization of the rural areas in terms of a modernist plan, a modernist scheme, existed or survived, at least we may say, until the 80s, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. And then with the expansion of the city, this urban expansion of the city, somehow they were swallowed by the city, if I may, but still Narenci exists. And it was one of the closest areas that you showed us to the city center. Also these expansion, which you showed us, what was the name of the farm that turned into an expo area?
Hot climate.
Scientific research. Not only that one, but also the dokuma factory, the cotton factory is also turned into something else, also demolished. And you showed us the Biledi farm with a swimming pool and all the high-rise buildings behind. So maybe also connected to what Funda Solmaz said, is there any preservation or conservation program nowadays, at least in order to keep these I don't know, history of it, idea of it in mind? Because lastly, you showed the picture of the İpek school, and which I read from the sign that it's the Fen İşleri Daire Başkanlığı. So it used to it belongs to the municipality of Antalya, the greater municipality of Antalya. But if I'm not mistaken, recently there was also a renovation in that area. So I'm very much scared whether it is demolished as well, because I saw several buildings were torn down in the municipality area. Do you know any idea about that?
Thank you for your question and also for your comments. Indeed, as you said, after 60s, especially with the tourism development plans regarding Antalya and all the coastal city in Turkey, indeed, the situation is changing and the balances are changing in the city because the economy is more depending on tourism nowadays. And so even though agricultural facilities is still continuing, and in many cities we are sending agricultural products from Antalya, but city is known with its touristic facilities now, especially for international level. The buildings you mentioned, for instance, Dokuma factory. Sorry for this mistake. Dokuma factory, the cotton weaving factory, was renovated, restored. Indeed, it was not demolished. It is renovated, but of course, how it was protected can be discussed maybe, as we can discuss in any other application, as we saw in Cappadocia as well. Indeed, the more difficult thing is in Antalya about the things which I was presenting was they are belonging to Republican period, which we can say modern architectural period, and which is not very well known as a heritage still in Turkey condition.
Something we already discussed in our previous sessions, yes. Yes.
So this is the much more difficult problem in that sense. In that village institutes, or factories, now industrial heritage started to be understood maybe better in comparison with the other modern architectural buildings. But still conservation of modern heritage in Turkey is very problematic today, especially in that kind of peripheral cities. It is much more difficult. Maybe in Ankara, which is the capital of the republic, it was much more easier maybe. Still we are losing buildings in that city as well. In Antalya, it is much more difficult. Of course, we cannot say any conservation plan, especially a holistic plan about the city. Unfortunately, we cannot. But building by building, they are restoring sometimes, but restorations can be discussed, as I said. And sometimes they demolish and they don't consider that values as the cultural value, cultural heritage. So we are at least trying to document them before demolishing. It is maybe the first thing we can do for now, unfortunately. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zeynep Hoca. Thank you, Esin Hoca. Any questions from the audience? Any comments? I would like to go on with my comment and question to the joint presentation, which was also very interesting, looking at the cities from geographical parameters perspective, to Kasuke, Sakura, and Adrian Torres. I know, as I understand, the research is still ongoing, and you are trying to compare different cities from these geographical parameters, and especially hydrographical basic perspectives. What I found interesting is that you try to combine or bring together the geographical priorities with socio-cultural or socio-spatial or historical parameters, especially from this cultural perspective. So far with your findings, what kind of relationship have you found in terms of the socio-cultural issues and these geographical parameters?
Bueno, Kosuke, yes, I think the notion of memory of water in somehow, or urban stratigraphy in our case related to these hydraulical systems, has both two sides. No, on one side it has this archaeological value that gives the evolution and morphogenesis of a territory that many times is related to these agricultural origins, peri-urbanities that becomes urbanities, and somehow so there is a transcription of rurality to urbanity, and it has a value in somehow because it's of course related to any kinds of proto-industrial craftsmanship, for example, in the cities. So the layers society from our point of view is another stratigraphy of the reinterpretations of this history, no? But on the other hand, the water in itself, it brings life in terms of ecological and ecosystem-based logics, whether rural in a previous proto-anthropization of the landscape, or else the runoff of water, the topography and orography that in somehow is part of landscape, and urbanity adds and sometimes obliterates, hides for different reasons. We believe both layers, social, archaeological, and ecosystem-based values that these water systems brings to urbanity are worth it to recover.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else you would like? Would you like to add something else, Kosuke?
Kosuke?
You're muted.
No, it's enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Alessandro Kamitz is raising hand.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Please, Alessandro.
Yes, another comment for the Matsubara paper. At Uzagi University, we have an ongoing master thesis about the Great Mosque of Damascus, which is trying to reconstruct the formation process of that building and the surrounding tissue, starting from the beginning of the settlement all the way to these times. So probably your research on the master plan, 1968 master plan, is indeed very useful for that purpose. And we have here the student whose name is Luay Hussein, who is from Damascus, but he is now in Turkey, in Istanbul. So I don't know, I'm trying to introduce him. Luay, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Professor. Thanks to you and to the team to record the session. I was able to go back and check the presentation before I had. So yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe following Alessandro's comment, if you
Sorry. One more thing. Maybe you want to exchange emails with Matsubara, because I think we should invite him. I'm not sure when, because the semester is almost over. But I think we should organize something about Damascus, where we look at the past, we look at the planning, and we can be in touch with Matsubara, which is also for another thing, because that evolutionary theory is, I think, very actual today. So the city is not a machine. The city is a living organism, and as well, the architecture is not a l'architecture doit marcher of Le Corbusier. That is not good. We have to think of architecture of something which is alive, okay, in the city as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I was going to continue the discussion to get a comment from you, if possible. Do you think the evolutionary planning theory is still valid, or is it still applicable to contemporary cities, if you consider the planning theory today?
Yes, I think so. It's applicable, still applicable. But of course, we should consider the context of application. But as far as for Damascus or some Syrian cities, which was destructive, maybe we should reconsider the history of urban planning, considering to the archaeological side. This is my theory, my opinion.
Thank you. If we have, I think we have a couple of more minutes. I would like to just make a comment for Donika's presentation. All these Bedesten buildings are actually part of an urban context. I know that you have concentrated on their restorations and their adaptive reuse strategies in the two examples that you have shown. However, I would suggest that their reuse strategies and their restoration strategies has to be really dealt with the revitalization of the historic urban cores or historic urban quarters, because as far as I know, all these Bedesten buildings are actually part of a historic context, and they are in the core now, even though the cities are expanding. So if you could make a comment, because you only concentrated on the building itself, but their local context, their historic context, urban context, and their contribution to urban form and urban morphology is very important. So you cannot disregard this contextual way of looking at these Bedestens, even if there is the best restoration possible.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Zeynep Hoca, would you like to? I don't know. I think we
yes.
We can wrap up the session.
Yes, please, Hocam. Thank you very much to all the presenters. It was a very interesting and fruitful discussion in the end, which I'm very grateful to all of you. And I would like to thank Şebnem Hoşkara for her participation as a chair for this session. And
it was my pleasure. I think overall the conference has made a big contribution to the field, to architecture, to planning, to archaeology. It was very interesting. I'm sure the organizers are very tired. You would need a big rest after today. And also I would like to thank all the participants who are, all the audience who are with us today, early in the morning or late in the afternoon in some parts of the world. Just thank you very much for this organization.
Thank you very much, Hocam. Sorry, Zeynep, allow me 1 minute to stop the live streaming. Hence, the next session is not supposed to be live streamed. So, I'm just change computer and do that.
Sure.
But, so wait before you introduce them.
Sure.
Welcome
course.
to AACCP.
But let me check it again. Yes, okay. Go on, please. I mean, you have your time. I will be waiting for you to say okay. Yes.
Yes.
In a second, I will be introducing you.
All right.
I'm just waiting.